Welcome to the Go BHB podcast today. I am super lucky because I'm here live with Joey Savage of Savage Nutra.
What's up, people?
And couldn't be more excited to talk about Go BHB and really dive into the history, not only of who you are as a formulator and how we met and how Go BHB has played not only a part in your life, but so many big things to come. So we're going to start from obviously the beginning.
Okay.
Who are you and what's your background initially when it comes to your schooling? That's where I want to go.
My schooling. That's probably what makes this really interesting. I'm Joey Savage. I am a formulator, and what that kind of really means is, at least when it comes to like the realm of dietary supplements that we work in, is that I decide like what and how much usually goes into the product. And that comes to like active ingredients, sweeteners, flavors, all the things that, or I mean, at least if it's in a beverage format, if it's a capsule, I'm doing something completely different. Or if it's a food, I'm doing something completely different. But really like finding out what the active parts are that make something do what it does, or at least, try to do what it says it does on the label. And I try to do that really well.
And you had this curiosity since you were a kid and you thought, I'm going to go to college and learn how molecules play together?
Not at all. It never really works out that way. But this is pretty much all that I've ever done. And I started in this industry when I was 16 years old because a friend of mine who was like considerably older, it's like I'm 16, I've got like a 30-something-year-old friend who's like a manager of a GNC. And I was big into working out and stuff at the time. And he's like, I'm going to bend the rules for you, buddy. I'm going to get you in. I was like, that would be great. Like, I would actually like to have a job, where I'm, not mowing lawns or installing security systems or doing something that I absolutely hate and is in the air conditioning. So I ended up getting this job at a local GNC, and I started selling supplements there. And I really liked, I would read the magazines, because like magazines were a thing back then, and they would be full of these advertisements. And most of the time they have like little technical scientific tidbits, and I would just feed off of those. And whenever like someone was coming in, they're shopping for XYZ product, and be like, did you know that increases your caloric burn by like 212%? And they're like, oh, really? And I was like, yes. You want to buy it?
You actually knew what you were talking about at the GNC checkout desk.
I just read the magazines and like got, the marketing material, and that usually like fed me as far as like what I was going to engage these people in conversation with. And I carved out like that technical angle pretty early on. And there was some weird guy. And plus, if you work in a supplement store, it's full of like weird guys and gals that come through the door. There's all kinds of walks of life of weird that will come in and talk to you about like why they take this or why they take that. And this guy, he seemed pretty knowledgeable at the time. And
creatine is steroids.
Not so much that. Like I don't buy into that part of it. But
this guy,
yeah, he comes in and he was telling me about how cool cat's claw was as an antioxidant. I was like, oh man, I didn't know. You're telling me all this stuff. And he's like, you should get into this. Like the actual formulators, they make like 6 figures and stuff. And I was like, And like 2 years later, I'm trying to go to like school for finance. And I was going to go to school in Florida. And one hurricane came by like a month into me being there. And I was like, I'm not doing this. And I left. And I packed up everything in my car and I drove back to Texas as fast as I could. And on the way back, I visited my sister who was at Texas A&M University and decided like, and everyone was like happy and friendly there. And it was a very different response than what I got when I was in Florida, because like I was alone. I didn't know anybody. And I decided I was going to go to Texas A&M, and instead of, studying finance, I was going to learn about genetics.
Which, by the way, you are phenomenal at numbers. I don't even know how your brain does it so fast.
I do a lot of this.
You are superb.
Yeah. But that's one of the things formulating will teach you is how to do string math, like off the cuff, and like no percentages, and like figure out what the cost per unit is of, BHB and this energy drink we have right here.
Which we'll get to.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. But so I decided that I'm going to go to Texas A&M and I'm going to study genetics and biochemistry. And I did that, and I had a lot of fun. I was not as successful I was successful in a couple of different ways. I would honestly, I would get restless, and I would start taking classes that were like years beyond what I should be doing. Like I remember having like a class, it was embryology, which is usually like a senior level class that, people that are like trying to go to veterinary school or medical school are trying to do. And I'm just in there just completely fascinated because I'm learning about the cellular pathways that go on that take like this egg and sperm fusion that turns into like this whole ball of cells that are like entirely made out of stem cells, and learning about the expression of different proteins that determine right and left and front and back and eyeballs from skin and muscles. And like that was stuff that completely fucking thrilled me. And all the while, I'm still working at a supplement store.
So it's almost like you now have a job that supports your interest, and then you're going to school taking these classes, almost like a self-discovery of...
it feeds itself kind of thing. Like I'm learning here at school to help me sell supplements because like I just went to a local store there and, it's just started learning with these guys, and I bought some products there that were in aluminum bottles that were like really hardcore and everything. And it was by this company called Cellucor, which was known to nobody at the time.
That's how long they've been around.
This was 2006 when this was going on. And I end up going back to that supplement store time and time again. I end up, buying a whole bunch of Cellucor products in a 25-pound bucket of protein.
I remember when they were like, seriously, buckets.
I miss the days of the protein buckets.
I do too. For all you young kids now getting into the...
When you have a 5-gallon bucket of whey protein, you're set. You're set for a while. You will get tired of the flavor though. But I did go through more than one bucket, so I didn't really care all that much. But when I went back, like the second or third time, like I approached them about getting a job there because I'd worked at GNC, and I was like, I know how to do this, and they were cool with it. Interview went smoothly, and the guy who owned the store, he goes, I want you to promise that you'll work for me for 1 year before you leave and go to Cellucor. And I said, what? And I go back after that interview, and I said yes, and I took the job. But I immediately, I think I had some product in my car, and I looked at the back of the label, and it was in Bryan, Texas, like the city immediately adjoining College Station to the north. And I said, why don't I go check it out? And I just looked at that address, and I put it in my GPS, and I went immediately there, knocked on the door, go in, talk to their head sales guy, and I'm like, I want to work here. And I landed the job there too. And they were like, yeah, we'll take you. You're smart as fuck. And then and this was like on a Thursday or Friday. And then Saturday I get a call from the CEO of Cellucor.
But how many years up into that had you actually been putting into practice what you were learning to get you to where you like?
All of it from 16 to I was 18, 19, I guess.
Yeah. So about 2 years.
Yeah. I was pretty good.
And you're applying it though, not just like reading about it and BSing your way. You knew
I
what
was
you were
figuring
doing.
things out.
Yeah.
But the CEO of Cellucor at the time, or the actual founder, called me that Saturday, and he's like, listen, I talked to Cliff, who is the guy who was at the nutrition store, the guy who had interviewed me before I even went over to Cellucor. And he goes, I know everything that happened. And I'm like, fuck, like pants down, like this guy knows everything. And we get off into this conversation about like, everything that he's looking into, how excited he is about new product development. And he's like, I want you to work for Cliff for a year. And I was like, okay, but he goes, I'll tell you what, I will come in every Saturday, and this is Texas A&M University. Like they're a college town. They're big in football, and coming in on a Saturday is almost sacrilege because you're not watching the football game. You're not at the football game.
Oh, they bleed.
And I had to work. I had to work during the football game, unfortunately. So I was stuck there in the supplement store, and he would come in every Saturday and just mentor me for my entire shift.
Wow.
Like 8 hours at a time. And nobody's coming in the store because everyone's at the football game or going out to eat or doing whatever they're doing or seeing their families because they're in for the football game. No one's buying supplements. So he and I, we would just talk and talk and talk. And this went on for like 2 years. And eventually, like I became known amongst the Cellucor crowd of like, the guy that Paul was talking to the whole time, and it was like this mentor protege kind of relationship. I ended up going to football games with those guys and partying with those guys. And eventually, like, business was so slow at the store. Like, I called up who was their accountant at the time, Doss, and I'm like, Doss, I don't care if I have to mop and sweep the fucking floors. I would like a job there. Because I'd put in my dues at that point.
Yeah, no kidding.
And it was at the end of the school year before the summer break, and he said, okay. And I started as a road sales guy for them. Basically, like, it was my job to, and I was in training at this time where me and this guy, Kevin, we were driving all over Texas, going to different, supplement stores and stuff and getting people to buy product. And, I was in this role for maybe 2 months. Before there was a tragedy that happened to Paul, and he ended up going to the hospital, and he was just kind of checked out. But the good thing is I brought on 2 new accounts in 2 months. I thought that was pretty good for someone who had never done that job before.
Well, in supplement sales, for people that don't know supplement sales, your sales cycle just alone in ingredients can anywhere be from, if you're lucky, 8 months up to 2 years. And then on the retail side, 6 months. Just getting a product in and to launch.
I was pretty convincing, though.
I believe.
What was your sales pitch? I had pre-product. I had samples. I had a whole, training guide that I made. I had a pricing list. Like, I had all.
You were prepared.
All the things that you guys have.
Well, we're going to get to that too.
I made sure that I had that.
You had all the right tools to overcome any objection to why they were going to say no.
You have to have the right tools.
Right tools. Okay. So you're in selling to different stores, and then
this tragedy happens to the founder. He's in the hospital, and then Doss is like, I want you to come in and start formulating. And I'm like a junior in college at this point. And I said, yeah, okay. And I made my first product, which by today's standards would be entirely illegal.
And this is at C4.
No, it's at Cellucor. This is before C4 even existed.
Before C4, Cellucor.
And, I made this product, and it was called P6 Black, and it contained 3 different pro-hormones. You've been around. You remember the eras of ephedra and pro-hormones and all this stuff. I mean,
you hear about it, and you wanted to find it. You'd go to a GNC.
Yeah. I mean, in my first month of doing road sales, we got our GNC of franchise approval codes, which was a monumental thing. That it was. I remember being with Kevin in Dallas. Yeah, it was those kind of bottles. That's the original. I remember those. Cellucor.
They did like a fat burn, and you had a diuretic.
Yes,
you were part of that.
Yes,
I loved those products. Those were my first products I took when I started bodybuilding.
Do we have some here?
No, we got rid of them. I took my house.
Oh, okay.
That was the brand. When you would go to Gold's Gym and you'd go into their little pro shops and you'd say, hey.
That's the coolest shit that they had.
Totally. And even if it didn't work, which it did, it's the packaging.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're part of that.
Yeah. But yeah, so I came in, I made P6 Black, I had 3 pro hormones and this beautifully put together transport system that was for the pro hormones. So not only was it a pro hormone, it was a pro hormone that had extra shit bolted onto it that ensured that these things got absorbed really well, that, we tried to use botanicals and stuff to mitigate whatever side effects that you might incur through pro hormone
how do you
use.
define a pro hormone for the simplicity of?
For the audience?
Yes.
Okay. Anabolic steroids are illegal by the exact name, which was a big gaping hole in the logic of making these steroids illegal. And, even though they are not dietary ingredients by any means, but this line that was so clearly drawn between what is illegal and then there is this not necessarily legal, but it's not illegal. So if you take an anabolic steroid, and these are all different variations of testosterone, and they have all these different chemical modifications that change their activity. Maybe it works a little more strong. Maybe it has more androgen-like properties where, it can increase hair loss a bit more, but it also has like a drier look. So you don't bring on as much water, or it can be more estrogenic. So it brings on a lot of mass, but with all that mass comes water and potential estrogenic side effects. And these little chemical modifications can make them more potent, can make them last longer. It can do a lot of different things. But when you have this anabolic steroid and all of a sudden it's illegal by its very specific by the book name, you can just pluck a single hydrogen atom off of that molecule And suddenly it's not illegal anymore.
And call it a pro hormone, which is pro testosterone, which is muscle building
It is
in
a
simplicity.
precursor. Like as soon as that thing is in your body and hits stomach acid, it's like, oh, I found my hydrogen. And that's what happened. It was that is the line between legal and illegal. And, you know, we played with that. That's what the gray area is when it comes to these supplements and everything, or at least it was historically.
Till recently. Yeah.
Well, it was 2007. I want to say that the Designer Anabolic Steroid Control Act came into play. That's where they put more of a blanket on the whole thing and said, okay, we're on to what you're doing. And if you try to do this again, it's going to fall under this big blanket law, and you certainly can't do it anymore.
In trouble.
Yeah.
All right. So you're part of that, and you make these products.
Yeah. And I was there for, I guess, 6 years. And it was probably 2 years into working there that I made C4. And we never had a really good pre-workout. And
was it like a team that developed it, or were you the head, you know, designer? Like, how does that work?
I was specifically, I was the guy. I was the guy who was putting the things together. I mean, like there was a generation.
Which, by the way, that C4 was like the pre-workout too. It was good.
Yeah. Well, Doss, who eventually became like the CEO of Cellucor, he pulled me aside one day and he goes, "We have a problem with Jack 3D and I need you to take it out." And I said, "Hold my beer." I mean, pretty much, you know, I looked at their formula, understood the logic of everything that they were doing. And I was like, okay, they're checking this box, this box, this box, and this box. This is one of their hero ingredients. I'm going to take this, but I understand how this hero ingredient works better than these guys. So I'm going to do this, this, and this, and this to complement the activity of that specific ingredient. So it is so much more of a robust effect. Mm-hmm. And then we had a couple other, like, and that was when we brought creatine nitrate in, which was one of the first main pre-workouts to bring in a nitrate into a product. I mean, there was a lot of like groundbreaking kind of, there was a little borrowing from Jack 3D, but there was a lot of innovation that still went into it. And even like I was going through some old paperwork the other day where I was like looking at my original sketches when I made it.
No way, you still have those.
I didn't know I still had them.
Okay,
They were in a box,
really cool.
and I like found them in a box. I'm like, holy shit. So the real original formula had never made it to market because there was like one or two things in there that was still kind of pushing the gray area. Not so much in like the pro hormone kind of sense, but like there was like a caffeine bound niacin that I couldn't use because apparently it's used as a drug in Europe or something like that. And I couldn't use it.
Which, by the way, for those listening, you technically have to take your product and have it reviewed by a legal attorney who checks your ingredients and runs it by all the FDA regulations.
Yeah.
And a lot of brands do not do that. They skimp and they're cheap. And so as a consumer, you have to watch out for that. And they fool everybody, but you get into trouble if you don't. So the fact that you are like so meticulous, you're protecting your brand.
Well, I mean, there are ways to bend the rules and there are ways to break the rules.
Right.
And most people do not understand the difference. Because there are ways you can finesse it. Like I am amazed that like I was having a conversation with a guy who I was working with last night. I was like, I've gotten into many compliance battles with like GNC corporates, you know, their team as far as like their compliance and safety and everything. And, you know, if I have to like really go out of my way to get like a professional medical panel opinion to write a letter on this ingredient to get it into GNC, like I've learned how to navigate those kind of steps to where like, if I'm pretty sure something's legal, I can find a way to like get them to be like,
which isn't
you know
a bad thing
right.
because sometimes people reviewing them aren't going to have your level of knowledge.
No.
Just like with the regulations going on right now with like, don't sell this or don't sell that. And so that could probably be frustrating. But going back to...
And it makes it very hard on innovation.
Very hard. And then really you take a pre-workout and those became popular because what it brings to the table before you're lifting or whatever it is, like you said, vasodilators, getting your blood flow pumping. There's a purpose why you put certain ingredients in the way that you do. So for those who have never taken a pre-workout or you've never experienced it, there is a reason. This isn't just like a hype.
Yeah, I mean, caffeine is one of many reasons why people take pre-workouts. There are other things when it comes to blood flow, osmolarity as far as like water coming into your muscle cells or like, you know, amping up your endurance or making ATP. There's a lot of different things on the menu when it comes to a pre-workout. It's not just like, lots of energy and power I mean, that's why most people come to them, sure.
Because they think it's about the feel, but what it's really doing inside the body at a cellular level to really help you through it. That's why you're so meticulous.
It is a tool that blows the dust off of what you're actually capable of. That's how I like to describe
that analogy.
But yeah, that is where my like traditional. Oh, and after making C4, that thing shot off like a rocket. Obviously, we know. I mean, C4 still exists to this day.
Oh, it's still in Costco.
It's in a can. It's in a bottle. There's like 9 different variations. There's so much legacy that came off of that. So I dropped out of school, and I went to go into do formulating full time. And like that's essentially like I dropped out like my junior year of college, and you know from then I just like I've been self-teaching the entire rest of the time. I mean, granted, like the university system certainly gave me like a really good platform, and it gave me a lot of like ways to understand this. But God, I was burning through clinical studies like faster than anybody else ever was.
You found your natural ability.
Yeah.
You found your natural talent, and you just dove into it.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty powerful.
Well, I was also paid to. I mean, like, you're in a sense like paid to learn and paid to prop us up and paid to make us look good. And like, you know, I definitely felt that, and I definitely had like some really big shoes to fill with their founder and former formulator, like no longer being in the picture. And I had to make up for that somehow. And there was a lot of pressure on that. Probably more pressure I put on myself than anything. But, you know, I really enjoyed it. I was a pig in shit. I'm still a pig. I'm still here, and I'm still doing it to this day. Like, this is what I like to do.
What is it, 20 years later? Yeah. Really? That's experience and applied knowledge speaks volumes, because you've got people that come out of college and they don't even know how to apply the knowledge they've learned. And then they don't even go into the field that they just spent all this money learning.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I think it's a little bit jarring for some people because, like, I mean, I was, you know, essentially I was formulating at age 22, which seems really, really weird. But by that time, I'd already been in the industry for 6 years.
And the industry was so different then. Yeah. I mean, it's not like it is now, where it wasn't even close to being saturated, and the products that were there were quality, and you knew what was in them, and the brands were just starting out. And then if you think about it, over the last 20 years, the brands that have still stood in the game goes to show you it's not an easy thing to do. So you have to have a quality.
I've seen many brands rise and fall.
Mm-hmm. So during this time, is that when you came across Go BHB?
So I had left Cellucor at that time, and, you know, I get bored. And when I get bored, I have to do something. And I ended up starting my own company, and it was mostly around the realm of nootropics, because nootropics kind of popped up at this time. I guess this was 2015 and onward. Okay. Or around that time. And nootropics became like this major thing. And one of the things that came on the stage during this nootropic thing was beta-hydroxybutyrate. And I liked it for the nootropic aspect. But then along with nootropics comes like the whole anti-aging longevity thing. Those things kind of run hand in hand, because those biohackery kind of people, they like both. Okay, you can't just have enhanced cognition without trying to like extend your lifespan into oblivion. So, you know, and those two fields really kind of spin off of sports nutrition, because this kind of customer demographic believes in the ability to enhance themselves. And that can be in whatever aspect of their life. It doesn't have to be physical performance. It could be mental performance, or in the long run of life.
They care about self-improvement.
Yeah. Yeah. In every single kind of way. So I ran across this thing, BHB, and I didn't just run across it. It's because of Patrick Arnold. He was probably the one guy that I would say popularized this the most at the onset. And Patrick Arnold is always on the cutting edge of shit. If you don't know who he is, for people at home, you should definitely look him up. The guy is
a genius when it comes to chemistry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he was very smart when it came to pro hormones. So like naturally I looked up to him as far as like him being the cutting edge.
FYI, back to the baseball steroid days.
Yes.
If you guys want like a hint. And we talked about it with Rick Collins on another podcast, if you guys want to go reference.
Did you talk to him about Balco?
A little bit, yeah. He said how he was part of the case and touched on it a little bit. And
did you know that what Barry Bonds took was the most potent steroid known to man?
No clue.
The most.
All right. So he's part of that. And he's around now BHB.
Well, yeah, I mean, like even him, like everybody else, you graduate from like this sports nutrition, to like nootropics and to the like longevity thing, and he kind of found this molecule that was at an interesting crux between both, like longevity, sports performance, and at nootropics at the same time, because this molecule does a lot of stuff. And I said, I would like to have a piece of that. I mean, like anytime I get like envious of somebody doing something, like I'm just like, I want that for myself. And I'm a connoisseur of weird, strange foreign molecules. And if I find something I'm looking for, like I will track down whoever the supplier is and be like, you have something I want.
But you want something that's meaningful. You're not just looking for like another turmeric or what everybody else has. And I think that's the magic behind this and where the innovation has come. Because before Patrick Arnold, where was really BHB a history from?
So there was a study by this guy named Richard Veach, and we're going very old school.
Well, I think people need to know.
Richard Veach
it's been around for so long.
Yeah, Richard Veach was publishing papers in like the first half of this century, along with guys like Krebs, who like is the namesake for the Krebs cycle or the tricarboxylic acid cycle, the citric acid cycle. It's how your ATP gets generated in the mitochondria.
Going back to high school chemistry, if you didn't learn about the Krebs cycle, read up on it. Continue.
Yeah, we're in your biology class. It's probably where you'll find it. So yeah, you have these things in your body called mitochondria. They're the powerhouse of the cell, and they basically turn all fat and sugar and sometimes protein into ATP, which is what your body runs on. Or in some cases, BHB. So basically, like this guy comes from very, very, and if we could just take a moment to like step back and look at like the past century of like scientific endeavor to find out like, okay, we didn't even know that in like the past, let's go 150 years, since 1900. In 1900, we didn't know about the DNA double helix. In 1900, we didn't really know about the complex, molecular biochemistry that's going on inside each one of our cells. We had no idea about we had inclinations, but we didn't understand and have like the real grasp of the depth and complexity of it as we do today with like genomic sequencing and molecular engineering and CRISPR-Cas9 and like all the razzle-dazzle shit that we have now that, people a century ago would just look at you like you're an alien from another planet with crazy technology. Like, and they probably burn you at the stake because you're a witch. That kind of stuff.
So for us simple folk, basically magical molecules that we already naturally make within our body that these really amazing scientists bring to life exogenously.
Sure. Yeah. But where I was going with that is Richard Veach did an original study. He had a perfused heart, which basically means you got a heart, like a rat heart, and being perfused means you're running blood and fluid through this thing on a little machine. And he fed this thing BHB, and he also compared it to straight glucose. Then he did a combination of BHB and glucose, and he did all kinds of cool data analysis and everything. And he was the first one to deem BHB a quote-unquote super fuel because it could produce so much ATP so much faster than glucose, and it wouldn't produce as much reactive oxygen species, which is usually like the exhaust of just general metabolism, which can also like hurt your cells. So with more energy, less waste product, way more efficiency than just sugar alone. And then he also hypothesized that the combination could be even more compelling. So he was the pioneer that found out that BHB had application. It was Patrick Arnold who first did the chemical synthesis and commercialized or made it commercializable. The BHB could be made and taken in an exogenous form. He was the Prometheus on this. He took it from the gods and brought it down to the earth so we could all have it. And from there, I mean, that was like the spark of Prove It. Prove It was like, as soon as like all the news of this exogenous ketone started catching fire, this multi-level marketing company called Prove It just comes out of nowhere and just took everything by storm. And this was in the peak of keto.
And that kind of leads into where Rob and Gary come into play with teaming up with like Dominic and his studying of what BHB can do as far as like Alzheimer's, dementia, metabolic health.
Yeah.
And all the amazing science there.
Dom was really interested in its potential medical applications for like seizures, traumatic brain injury, hypoxia. Like he's done a lot of studies on not just, exogenous ketones, but the keto diet. As far as like who has taken BHB into the clinic and really looked at, how we can flex it here and there, that is Dom's domain for sure.
And he's doing some stuff, I think, with the military even now.
And with NASA.
Which is huge.
Yeah, he's doing stuff with the military and with NASA. I think he was part of what's called NEMO, which is it is an analog habitat that is like off the east coast of Florida, where people just live in a capsule underneath the sea for days on end, and they're taking BHB or following a ketogenic diet or maybe one or the other or both.
Well, Navy SEALs aren't going to do a ketogenic diet. They need glucose. I mean,
sure.
But the biggest reason they took it, if you want to touch on that, is what ketones do for seizures when you're underwater.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have a lot of air and your body's going to produce a lot of metabolic waste without having anything to like really relieve it, there's potential applications with that. But I mean, all the stuff with like seizures and TBI and all that stuff, like us and dietary supplements, we don't really get to talk about that.
No, but we'll get to that. I'm going to keep you on the timeline.
Oh, okay.
But because we'll get to that in functionalities. But so you come across this through hearing about what Patrick Arnold's doing.
Yeah.
And at that time, you're on your own. Is that when you became part of Glaxon?
That was before. So I had my own brand at this time that I was talking about earlier with all the nootropics. And I decided that I want a piece of this BHB action. I reached out to the guys over at Compound Solutions because I found out they were the first ones who were going to have distribution of BHB. And I was very excited. And I hit up Matt Titlow and I said, I got to get in on this. And Adam Traw, who's working for them, who now works for Pronova, sent me samples of it. And I got these samples and I said, this is good. I don't need to do anything to this. What flavor is this? Orange mango. And I'm like, okay, just let me know the sweeteners, the flavor companies, all that stuff. I will do all the legwork, and I wanted to put this in a bottle. And I was the first one to market who put BHB in a bottle on the shelf in 2017, and it was like a flash in the pan. There are several reasons why that happened.
But what kind of drink was it? A bottle, hydration, energy? Like, what was the drink?
It was a BHB drink. I mean, it did have
but how you marketed it, like
just BHB. Oh, you did? Like a healthier Gatorade, I guess you could say, because it did have like calcium and sodium and magnesium in it. So I mean, like it did have electrolytes. But I mean, I just wanted to give people BHB in a drink because I thought it was novel enough and cool enough and it could stand on its own. And, sure, electrolytes are, I mean, this was before Prime and all that. I mean,
before Prime, and what you said was key is during Gatorade, right? Like they're still considered the biggest hydration brand.
Yeah.
And here you are trying to do it differently.
I just didn't care. I didn't care that much about the hydration. I cared about the tech that I was bringing to market, and that was BHB. And I just had to make it delicious. That was the other thing. Like, if you could make it delicious and to where like no consumer would object to it, so it was like all natural sweeteners and everything. What I did not know at the time was the finicky chemistry of the BHB salts and how that can get jostled a bit. So there were several different reasons of why you can't just throw BHB salts into, a bottle of drink. Now, for the first manufacturing batch, it went well. The second one, I had one flavor where half the batch had these weird white snowflakes that showed up in the bottom. And I was like, oh no, what could that be? And then in my second batch, like that one actually, I think the same thing probably happened. They told me it got contaminated with yeast and mold and they couldn't release the batch to me. So I like lost a significant amount of my raw materials and they weren't willing to pay for it.
So not just in raw materials though, but your investment for anybody starting a brand.
Oh yeah.
It's incredibly expensive.
My ship was getting sunk immediately, especially because they weren't willing to compensate me for it. But it turns out what was happening is that the BHB salts, so the BHB is bonded to calcium, sodium, magnesium. But whenever you introduce acids for flavoring, citric acid, malic acid, tartaric, to mimic, your citrus fruits and your orchard fruits and your berries and everything. They will trade partners with the mineral part of the BHB salt. So the calcium will become calcium citrate, the magnesium becomes magnesium malate, the sodium becomes sodium tartarate. And all of that precipitates out as little snowflakes in your drink, and you are left with BHB acid, which ends up floating in the material. which was not what I was trying to market. So like all of my label claims are completely fucked and everything. Like it worked for a little while, and it works long enough, you know, for me to submit it in for a supply side editor's choice award back then. And I got the best sports nutrition, food and beverage for the supply side editor's choice awards in 2017, supply side West.
Which is actually really a big deal because a lot of brands apply to that. So to win that is really a big deal.
The fact that I had the coolest, newest shit in a really delicious format, like in a bottle, ready to go, was pretty much why I won that. And like the staff, because it is editor's choice, they share it amongst their staff and they find out, you know, do they like it? And everybody liked it. They all got the BHB buzz. Everything worked out really well.
Ooh, what's that?
Oh, is this a photo of a photo?
You have a photo of a photo?
So this was me and TK and Sam, because TK was there during all this.
You have been with TK that long?
During the Supply Side Editor's Choice Awards in 2017.
Oh my gosh.
And we had some pretty wild suits back then.
I can very colorful.
Yeah, it's really
that's cool.
Yeah, it's really fun when you go to Supply Side and you know you're just there to win an award. And you can just spend the rest of the time, you know, shopping, you know, not really having meetings with anybody. I'm just here to win the award.
What comes with that award?
A really cool award.
I mean, but accolades, like how people recognize you in the industry.
Oh God, I don't know. Like I make a habit of trying to win as many awards as possible. That's kind of what I do now, or to do weird stunts. You get published on a couple of different websites and stuff. It's mostly for industry insiders. I got a couple ribbons that were adhered to my trade show badge. I got a really cool, you know, crystal award thing that is in my house now. And, you know, a lot of people wanted to know who the winners of the awards were. So there is a little trickle in, like, people start knowing who you are. So that was certainly, you know, one of those moments where it's like people starting to know me on the map. But like, there were countless awards that we won with Cellucor, countless, especially for C4, that preceded this. And I knew that coming out of C4, I was like, I cannot let this be a one-time thing. Like that was another one of my motivating factors of like, C4 can't be my one trick. Like that, I'm not going to let the good days be behind me. They're the good old days be behind me. I was like, I refuse. So, you know, I made them happen again. And that's what's going on, you know, with the Ketone IO, which is what it was called, winning another award in 2017. And then after that, going to Glaxon and working on. So the story there is after that second batch, and my shit was entirely fucked, whether it was contaminated, whether it was precipitated, or whether it was whatever, I wasn't getting compensated for it. And I needed to figure out what to do because like this was going to be my job. And now all of a sudden it wasn't going to work because we were running out of money, and doing beverage runs is not cheap.
This was all your own money, no investors, all your own brand.
We had two small investors. One of them was my business partner's dad. And it was just like, we can't keep it going with like the cash on hand that we have. Like we tried to sell out of as much product as we could and just like tie it up. And I sent like a case of this as samples to a friend of mine who I was working on like this other side brand with, but I wasn't like sure if it was going to take off or not. And he sent it to a friend of his who was a CEO of a manufacturer in Houston who loved it and ended up getting an introduction to him through this mutual friend. And that is how I ended up meeting Michael at 0 Day at Glaxon. So like, that whole having a business and everything kind of bridged me between one brand of Cellucor and another brand at Glaxon. So like I was doing my own thing for a while, and then this other opportunity just came up, and he was like, I want you to build another Cellucor, was what he was like kind of looking for.
Which that packaging was kick-ass.
Yeah.
The whole brand was.
I mean, it was we had the same lids.
And that's even how I met you, was the recognition of Glaxon. And when you talked about it at Sands, and we'll get to that, but you didn't know about Ketone Labs at the time or hadn't even met Gary and Rob because you had just started with Glaxon and you were starting to source your ingredients for their line.
Well, I went back to Matt Titlow and I was like, are you not selling BHB anymore? And he's like, no, the patent holders, they took it back. And I said, well, who the fuck are they? And I was like, is it Pat and Dom? And he's like, no, it's not Pat and Dom. And I'm like, well, then who is it? Because I got to get some BHB. And he's like, well, I don't know if I can tell you. And I was without BHB for year and a half, 2 years. And
because they weren't selling it at the time.
No, they weren't selling it, and I
interesting.
didn't know where to find it. And then eventually, my good buddy Ben Kane over at Price Plow, he knew a guy who knew a guy who got me in touch with Tom Williams at Ketone Labs.
Tom Williams, super good guy. I love working with Tom.
My first conversation with Tom was, if you're not willing to buy, I think it was like 2 metric tons per month.
We did. We had we started at Ketone Labs. So when they created the company, they really wanted to protect the IP and beta hydroxybutyrate. As you know, it's super magical.
Yeah.
And people were not using it properly. There was a lot of negative stuff going on with it.
Yeah.
And so really it kind of comes down to like, how do we not only protect the brands who are using it, because they're buying it from us and they're using it right and dosing it right. And really, like we talked about earlier in our podcast, the people who don't do the right things, we want them to be shut down because they're not being ethical.
I understand, because like a lot of brands had the BHB at the time and it was scattered to the winds and you had no control over it. Like, I get that. But that wasn't going to stop me.
Yeah, it was not going to. There was high MOQs as it started out, and it was kind of like initially to start weeding out the people that weren't as serious.
I wasn't going to let Tom weed me out, though.
Yeah,
that was the thing. And he was like 2 metric tons a month. And I go, Tom, you do realize this is 24 metric tons a year, and I would have to be like 100% dedicated to only selling ketones. Like, I would have to be such a monster, and not only just I would have to be like a monster, I would have to be a monster ketone company. And I was like, that really doesn't mesh well with what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to make a SKU ad to my sports nutrition line here. Okay, I just want a BHB option in the lineup. You don't understand, like the
I
bigger
just want a
picture
piece of
here.
it.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the case with most brands when it comes to like a BHB product. It's like, this is something that is a cool, nice ad. You could use it as a pre-workout. You could use it as an intra-workout. You could use it to help you burn fat. You could do it for cardio. You can do it for all these different reasons that people would use BHB. But, you have to look at it. It's a tool. It's a tool that can either complement other things that you're doing, or you can use it on its own and you can get plenty of good results out of it. And I just think at the time, I don't think that Rob and Gary understood the versatility of the ingredient until like I was like, because we made a product called Hybrid at the time, which was a dual fuel concept that had carbohydrates in addition to ketones, because I wanted to give Richard Veach his justice on that whole experience of creating the true superfuel. But then I wanted to do more with it, and I wanted to put it into a pre-workout. And we had that hybrid product for maybe a year. We had some leftover compound solutions material, but it was when we ran out of that, we needed to make more hybrid. And then we wanted to end up extending this into our pre-workouts that, I needed to have some sort of a conversation with Rob and Gary. I had to breach the walls of the castle of Ketone Labs to find out, okay, what the fuck do I have to do to get this material?
I remember that because they gave me a list and they said, listen, these are the accounts that have either bought BHB or, are currently sourcing it, and you get to call on them and you get to basically help get them BHB because we're selling it again.
Yeah.
And for those of you listening, Rob talks about it on his podcast with Price Plow, that process if you want to know more. But basically, that's how I met you, was we were putting a deal together to get BHB in your product.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I wanted to use less than your standard dose of 5 grams. And I was like, I've got a theory here that you can still feel the feeling that you get from BHB with a lower dose, which was controversial at the time. There were cost constraints involved. And I was like, look, if you want a 5 gram dose, you got to be at 5 gram prices. I mean, and if you've got things like creatine and stuff to like gauge it against, like you understand that certain ingredients that are used at high dosage levels, things like leucine, which are like at 3 grams, or even like protein, which is like 25 grams, like the per kilo price of that comes down substantially, because like as you're building a multi-component formula, there are certain cost thresholds for certain line items. And unless it is amazing, like world-changingly unique, which BHB probably argumentally is, you can't be asking that much on a per unit basis. otherwise you'll get dropped from a formula or they'll swap something out. But, in my mind, I was like, no, BHB is so unique that I have to have it. Like I'll do a lower dose. If you want to keep your pricing where it is, or, I'll make a product that is, at least partly dedicated to just BHB. And we had both options within the product line.
You put BHB, you formulate this incredible pre-workout, which wins.
Yeah, pre-workout of the year.
Pre-workout of the year.
I forgot what year that was. I think it was 2021?
20...
I don't know.
2022, because wasn't it just after
It might have been 22.
Yeah, between 2022 and 2023, when you were putting that in. So you go to SANS, which is Sports
and Active
Nutrition Conference.
Yeah.
And they ask you to talk about your product, which the packaging was super dope. Yes, I said dope.
I entered myself into this thing called Startup Stars because Glaxon was such a young company, and I was like, we're totally a startup star. And I really wanted to go to that conference.
That's what I love about your thinking is the whole time I've been listening to you, the people you go to work for, whether it was GNC or your own business or Glaxon, you're always thinking about how your talent and skills can support the vision of that brand or company.
I'm seeking them out. Almost at every single turn, I'm seeking them out. And I'm not really guiding my ship. There's a higher power that's probably doing that. I'm just trying to cure my boredom in whatever direction I'm trying to go.
That is what you call the flow, I think, in life, where you just allow it to guide you, which was so cool because Rob and I came out to SANS and we listened to your talk. I remember you sat down the table and I was like my first time really meeting you because we'd had so many interactions before. One of those being where I called you and I was like, hey, I did this podcast with Viren. I'm learning about liposomals. I think this can go in a liposoma. And you said,
of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
And so that's when we kind of had that conversation, took it to Rob and Gary and we created these really cool prototypes.
Yeah.
And it's just that, right? Caring enough about what you do and loving it that I wasn't bored by any means, but I was fascinated with BHB because I came from that bodybuilder background when you're dieting and you're producing your own BHB. So for me, it was I'm not dieting that hard, but I'm still feeling really good. What is going on in my body?
It's like the freakish flow you get when you fast for 48 hours.
Totally.
Or something like that, yeah.
So you're at SANS. Talk about, what you got to present there.
So I was part of Startup Stars, and I put in this application. And it was a month or two after. They're like, "Hey, we are picking you for Startup Stars, but will you sit in on these 2 different panels?" And it was interesting because I knew a lot of the people that I was going to be sitting on the panels with. One was just about the future of the industry in general, which I love to talk about. The other thing was just product innovation in general. And I was on a panel with Raza from Muscle Tech, and then the CSO Rachel from GNC. She's awesome.
Which, by the way, and I'm interrupting you, but that whole seminar conference they do is phenomenal.
So fucking cool.
Really well done. Great structure. All of the speakers.
It is the best of the industry.
100%.
The true innovators are there.
Yep.
Yeah. It's very expensive, but you should go. Everybody should go.
It's worth it if you're serious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was there and I was taking part in those panels and everything, but I was also there to accept an award for Startup Stars. I guess, is that this year? That was this year.
Yeah, it's this year.
Okay, so Startup Stars Award for 2023.
We're back on our years, are we? It's been so fast.
This year feels like it's been 20.
Well, we'll get there too. You started your own business after Glaxon, so
yeah.
A whirlwind. So continue.
So yeah, the thing was, we were there. It was Startup Stars Award. Did that whole thing, gave a whole presentation about why our company was cool. And I had 2 other panels after that, and just working with everybody that was there and talking to all the different ingredient suppliers, contract manufacturers, a little bit of everything. I realized I don't necessarily really need a brand in order to do what I want to do. And within 2 months after that conference, I was I think I'm just going to do this thing on my own. And
what did that feel like?
I mean, it was somewhat terrifying, but at the same time, it's like, it was like changing the tires with the car in motion. You know, you've got to hang outside of the window with a lug wrench and like really get it on and just do that to every single tire and be able to throw the tire on and keep going down the road. Because I did this pretty seamlessly. Like it was February that the SANS conference was, and by the end of March, I was on my own. So this was like less than 30-day span where I was like, I'm going to make this decision. I'm going to completely switch gears. I found an office that I wanted to start up a lab. I used my tax return that year to basically like fund all the different furniture and equipment and stuff that I was going to need for this offsite lab thing, and just transitioned right over into it.
I love how you announced it too. He gets on social media and he does a live, and you pull a C4. You're all, I'm going to need a drink.
Yeah.
It was the best.
Yeah, there's definitely like little hidden nuggets in like all the little things that I do, and that was tough because like I had put 6 years into Glaxon, and taking this thing that did not exist at all, making all this different like YouTube content, explaining the mechanisms of action of like these complex products, and then doing trainings with GNC like all over America. And taking us from being non-existent into GNC corporate with an unprecedented deal where we were like in partnership with GNC, to being brand of the year, to having pre-workout of the year, to all these different like heights, and it just kind of went out on top. And then they kind of had some trouble.
Yeah, but when you did that, we met with you for dinner. We didn't know a whole lot about you, but all the successes you had had.
Yeah.
And at the time, as Ketone Labs has been growing, we would, after we talked to you, and then I go to Arnold with you, and I start getting an even deeper insight on the industry on the supplement side. That's when it was like, we saw value in having someone that has been in it, and it was like, we've got to have this guy on our team.
Yeah. Well, and it's really nice because working with ingredient companies, I've been on the consumer side, and I'm a pretty tough critic, even when it comes to like ingredient companies that are like pitching me stuff, and because I'm pretty understanding of how a lot of things work, and I can filter through things pretty fast.
That's what I love about you too, because you're standard and you care about quality.
Yeah.
Because that's who you are in your character.
I can't tell you how many times like I will get on like a sales call with an ingredient company, and they pull up their PowerPoint deck, and I'm like, can we stop just for a minute right here? And I was like, can you just show me your specification sheet? I'm going to save us all a lot of time, and we're going to turn this into a way more interesting meeting than you going through a PowerPoint. We can go back to the PowerPoint, but let's take care of what I want first. No, but like, because I have that like mentality, it helps me in order to curate a proper sales experience that is a compelling sales experience that answers a lot of the questions that a potential customer might have, and to do it with a sense of showmanship.
You are all about show. Yes.
And that is kind of like and when I heard about the opportunity to work with you guys, I was like, okay, I know everything I don't like about how I've been working with these guys in the past. I love their technology. That's not the problem. The problem is not the product. The product is in a sense like the presentation and how we get the like to really do this technology justice, because it needed to be done. And there was a lot of people that didn't do it the right way, which is really disappointing. But like, I think like over the coming months, like we ended up making a video, and that video was really just a tool, like, and it didn't need to be a half hour. I apologize. Actually,
technically it's 24 minutes, and it's phenomenal done, because you give literally everything in 24 minutes with intriguing, by the way, great job on the, pop-up pictures. But I think what's important for people to understand as we move this direction in the podcast is BHB isn't just a keto diet. It's not just something you do as a trend. Your body starts with this molecule at the beginning of life. We don't produce enough of it because our central nervous system, the most incredibly powerful organ in our body, running everything, requires 20% more energy than our body. And if studies and research is starting to show that we crave it and need it, then why aren't we taking it more exogenously throughout our life?
Or if you burn a bunch of fat, you get some, but not a lot of people want to do that.
Nobody wants to burn their fat. Who cares about fat?
Well, I mean, it's, there's not a lot of people that really appreciate an active lifestyle, at least, like we would think, or we wouldn't have an obesity epidemic, right?
Which goes even more to the point of like an ingredient company has the ability to take something magical and really highlight what it can do in all of its functionalities.
Yeah.
And you saw the potential after having meetings with Rob and Gary and seeing and hearing their vision about what it could do, because they were diving into a lot of the research. But it's almost like we needed the right team of people.
You can't get too buried in the research. And I've made that mistake plenty of times in the past, where it's just like you're so deep in the science and you look like an absolute like conspiracy theory lunatic with all the lines. Don't you know what this means? And most people are like, no, I don't. Why don't you tell me in normal words? And we ended up creating like this promo box, which is like the ta-da.
Which
like,
we got to talk about this though.
Are we getting into this? Yeah. All right,
yeah. So Expo West, we go to Expo West and we're starting to see all the innovations, but there's not the talk of BHB yet. Still, people are kind of like on the cusp of like, what's cognitive and what can you do to help your body? And so it was really after that, they were like, how do we make an impact? And you had this idea, it's a roadshow.
The best thing about sales is to be able to do a demonstration, and not all ingredients are demonstratable. You can't. The thing about BHB, which makes it unique, is it's a magic trick that you can go from before to after within minutes, and you feel it. That is palpable. And I think that this is probably one of the most compelling ingredients. Is probably like caffeine, because you take it, you feel it. Okay, I can understand this now. But there's more to it than that. You can take it, you can feel it, and you can take like a blood ketone meter. You can take a baseline reading, and you can take a reading like a half hour, an hour later, and you can see an elevation of blood ketone. So like that's almost like a clinical like demonstration, grade magic trick right there. So there's the magic trick of the feeling. There's the magic trick of the before and after BHB readings that you can actually take and see, oh my God, my blood levels of this exogenous compound that usually, most people are taking ketone readings to manage their diabetes, but some people are doing it to enhance their diets. There's a whole different way that you can navigate, a ketogenic diet and make sure your ketones are at that level. Or if you're in our case, just to show baseline, you've got no BHB. After 20, 30 minutes of, ingesting a drink like this, a gummy, a shot, a capsule, which I was like, you guys need to explore the fact that you guys can be in all these different delivery formats, because BHB on its own, is it tart? Yeah, it's not like nail polish remover. It's not
jet fuel.
It's not insurmountable to flavor. It does have its own flavor profile that needs to be leaned into to a certain degree. So citrus, is favorable.
Yeah, but knowing you've got that tart taste should tell the consumer they have got the real.
Yeah, it's the real thing.
The real thing. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard, please share it and help us keep the conversation going.